Although the Great Chicago Fire was viewed as a bad thing, it was beneficial for the city of Chicago because it showed the architectural flaws that Chicago had. Since Chicago was made up of mainly wood, this catastrophic event was soon to happen. Since the event happened, it awoke the people of Chicago to change their building materials to a more reliable material such as concrete and steel. The Great Chicago Fire began on the night of October 8th, 1871. Legend says that Mrs. O'Leary's cow knocked over a lamp, which caused the fire to ignite. Although we do not know this to be true, we do know that the fire started in the general area of the O'Learys. The fire was able to spread quickly throughout the city, seeing as it was almost entirely made out of wood, and seeing as it was October, therefore there was very little rain and everything was dry. Back in the 1800s, almost everything construction-wise was made from wood. Sidewalks were made from wood, buildings as well. In the 1800s, Chicago mainly used flammable materials to build their homes and business centers. There were even 500 miles of sidewalk constructed mainly using wood. Can we blame them, though? Who would have thought that a cow would start a fire that burned 2,112 acres? Because of this, most of the city was left in ashes, causing the Great Rebuilding. The city of Chicago now began using materials like concrete and steel. Construction workers began to try to salvage buildings that weren't destroyed by the fire. As a result of using concrete and steel, our buildings began to get larger and taller. This caused the race for the sky. The race for the sky was a competition between cities to see who could build the tallest buildings at the time of the fire. Even the rooftops were flammable. They were either made of tar or shingles. This called for new material to be used, such as slate and brick. Houses were being made from brick, shingles were being replaced with slate, and new material called mortar became more popular within the city. What made the fire so bad and what caused it to spread so quickly was that since the fire began on October 8th, 1871, October is a very dry month, meaning there is little to no rain. Not only was it dry, but around this time it begins to get chilly. And because of the winds coming in, basically the climate and the strong southwesterly winds coming through were fuel to the fire, making it grow larger and making it become almost completely unstoppable. Chicago is a very tight-knit city where everything is close together, and neighborhoods were extremely close. This was a very bad scenario because all homes were built out of wood, so the fire engulfed neighborhoods whole. Now, of course, there were some technical and human errors in the alarm system. Firefighters had been worn out from putting out fires the day before, and originally they had been sent out to the wrong neighborhood. This gave the fire more time to spread. After all the damage had been done, and there was much to repair in the city of Chicago, a candidate for mayor, Joseph Mendel, pledged to rebuild Chicago as part of his campaign. As a result of the fire-strict building and improved fire codes were made in order to prevent this from happening again. Building with wood in downtown became banned, and new materials were being used, such as brick, limestone, and marble. The Great Rebuilding began on the damaged parts of Chicago. Luckily, Chicago's transportation system remained intact and was able to have materials shipped in without any problems. Fortunately, Chicago got many donations from other states that helped the rebuild. Once Chicago finally repaired using better building materials such as concrete and steel, Chicago's population began to grow because of the people that they needed to repair the city, such as engineers. This caused Chicago's economy to boom. The terracotta tile was discovered during the renovation of the Palmer House. Its architect John M. Van Osdale buried the blueprint in a hole in the basement under a thick layer of sand and clay. The blueprint survived the fire, and Van Oswald became became convinced that clay terracotta tile would make an excellent fireproof material. New building materials emerged, the most popular one being terracotta clay. It was very effective. Terracotta tiling made Chicago one of the most fireproof cities in the nation. Law required buildings to be built using a specific technique known as masonry, the act of fireproof materials being held together by a sticky mortar. Chicago made huge advances in architecture. They went from building structures out of wood to making skyscrapers out of the materials that were basically foreign to them. Chicago was one of the first cities to have a skyscraper. Because of all the advances in the Chicago area, the population began to increase as well. As the economy of Chicago quickly became a tourist attraction, ultimately, the Great Chicago Fire was a huge benefit to Chicago's architectural advancements, population, and economic growth, transportation hub, and its ability to become one of the most popular tourist attractions in the world due to its quick and efficient reconstruction. If it hadn't been for the Chicago Fire of 1871, Chicago would have never reached to its full peak of success as it did in result of the fire. Some people believe that Chicago would never be able to find out about its many flaws within the city, meaning this event would have occurred any other day and could have led to more serious problems. Basically, a more tragic tragedy than before, because by then the city's population would have increased and put even more people's lives in danger, as well as caused the city even worse damage due to the city's growth and advancements over the time. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 basically is one of those tragic flaws that simply define Chicago as a successful city as it becomes. Although it took Chicago a while to recuperate from this catastrophic event, they eventually were able to get back on their feet. In the long run, Chicago flourished as a successful city because of all the buildings and houses and businesses that it provided to the local economy. If the Great Chicago Fire of 1871 wouldn't have happened, Chicago would have been a very different place and would be a very small and undeveloped city. In conclusion, although the Great Chicago Fire was viewed as a bad thing, it was actually beneficial for the city of Chicago because it showed the architectural flaws of Chicago. Since Chicago is mainly wood, a catastrophic event such as this would have occurred in a later date either way. So, it was a good thing that this event occurred because it showed the flaws and it allowed the people of Chicago to change their building materials to a more reliable material such as concrete and steel and terracotta. It also deterred from any other things of this nature to happen at a later date. It also brought more expansion to Chicago's economy. Since there were new building techniques, they needed more skilled people in the arts of masonry and engineering. So it brought people from other places into Chicago and helped rebuild Chicago. And at the same time, it was rebuilding the economy of Chicago to make it flourish and a tourist destination as it is now.